And because when I see all the whack shit that's out there that's harmful and it's corrupting young minds and it's detrimental to society. So I felt for the first time in my life a moral imperative to reach as many individuals as I can. And this is 2024 in the West. The best way to do that is to
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast centered around the pursuit of truth and personal renaissance. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Michael Holt. Michael is the founder of Savage and Saint Consultancy. Michael is a holistic health expert and masculine vitality specialist, serving elite performers in the cultivation of vitality, depth of consciousness, and performance excellence. His extensive background in meditation, martial arts, Western psychology, core shamanism, holistic health, and exercise science combine to form a unique mind-body framework that is trusted by top-tier executives, founders, athletes, artists, and entertainers worldwide. He is a true Renaissance man in his own right. I'm excited to learn about his practice and his path to get here. Michael, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Zach. I have a hard time pronouncing that word pedagogy too. I think I might actually eliminate it from the bio and put it in framework. I never know how to say that damn word.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a huge fan of words, and I just knew that pedagogy typically falls out of most people's lexicon. So I was just
I get a
gonna,
little panic attack every time I have to say that word out loud. I think I'm gonna delete it and put it in framework.
yeah, hopefully it wasn't too much of an oversimplification, but yeah, you had, unlike most people, I didn't have to embellish too much. I think you did a good job of selling yourself with that bio, and I'm super excited. I think I was connected or put into your universe via Case Bradford, a mutual of ours. And I think that a lot of the language and conversation that we had in our kind of budding relationship, he was like, "Hey, I have this guy you would probably get along with." Obviously, we kind of share some aesthetics here, as you were noting before we hopped on the call here. The blue eyes, the bald hair, bald head, and beard action. Not sure if that's divine coincidence or something a little bit more, but
Yeah, we're
yeah.
both handsome as hell, let's be honest. And let's shout out Case. Case is an absolute living legend, and I'm glad that he was able to connect us.
100%. Yeah. Massive shout out to Case. I recommend people go back and listen to that podcast. He hosted me in his Los Angeles apartment. And so we got to jam in person. Um, but yeah, another guy who just totally embodies his philosophy and his body of work is represented in his physical body, which I think is super important. And we can get into that specifically later. But I typically don't love to default to the classic tell me how you got here origin question, but I know that your story is really, really special. So I'll kind of prompt it like this. What do you believe is the most important thing for me or the audience to understand about you, to understand how you got to where you are today?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would say that I'm a work in progress, that I have the lived experience of having a really, really hard time functioning, staying out of trouble, finding any sliver of love for the man in the mirror. I know what it is like to really live in the dark. And I stand before you, a man, a humble man who doesn't have it all figured out, who's far from perfect, but I'm pretty damn happy and I'm pretty damn healthy. And I know how I got from A to B. And now I'm just on the sole mission to call forth, anybody who's struggling in the dark. I want to share this path, to a new way of being, which is vibrantly alive, whole, and free. My work is really about freedom. And so I'll say quickly that this kind of body of work that I've uh, established throughout my varied explorations, which were all in an effort to alleviate my own suffering, appeals to two populations of men primarily: guys who are really, 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 really struggling, like I once was, and guys who are fucking, can I curse?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know why I hesitated for a second there. Guys who are fucking killing it, guys who are at the top of the top and still want to seek, an edge. So those are the two populations of individuals who are called to a deep kind of inquiry of self, of reality, of consciousness. Individuals who are really hurting and individuals who seem to have it all. The middle of the road, things are not so great, things are not so bad. That kind of lived experience is not necessarily conducive to taking a deeper dive.
Mm.
So I'm called to work with individuals who are wanting to take a deeper dive.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot there. I do think it's important to like emphasize that end point. I used to, as an optimist, think that simply sharing knowledge, and like kind of head knowledge and learning and reading and things like that could be used as a change agent for like true deep, wisdom and personal transformation. But I think I've come to the belief, especially just through coaching and being able to observe it in other people, not just myself, pain is required to incept that change. Like pain is the change agent, and I also think it's why we see the systems of control as they are in the world today. They aren't outright oppressive and tyrannical as potentially in history they once were. It's much more of keeping people in this low malaise. It's just okay enough, um, that there's not enough pain to be a change agent. There isn't truly enough like intense suffering for the human spirit to essentially resist and kind of rebound out of that low point. Rather, it's kind of, it's the comfortable salary that it's just stressful enough that you have to kind of keep plugging along and keep working, but it's not painful enough that you can't buy tickets to the game or an extra burger when you go out with friends and whatever it is to keep you in that like low hum of monotony and mediocrity ultimately. So yeah, I'm glad that
Yeah.
you emphasized that. And I had in my notes one of the things I wanted to ask you about, as someone who does coaching myself, but I think similarly like yourself, I never want to purport that I'm some sort of prophet figure, messiah figure, doctor figure that has it all figured out. How do you go about both communicating and also your internal feeling of being proficient, being someone who is an expert and an authority, but also owning the fact that you are and forever will be a work in progress?
Um, I think that it's critical. Well, any good teacher that I've ever had, any great teacher that I've ever had, is also a student in some other category of their life. So always remain a student, and that'll keep you humble. And I think that while it is, and in the self-help, self-improvement, spiritual space, you do see, wannabe gurus, which sickens me. And so definitely want to avoid that kind of that sense of having it all figured out or being, perfect. But I've also come to really accept that, like you mentioned, my bio that you read there at the outset of this conversation. You said you didn't have to embellish it. I embellished it enough. It's real. That bio is real and it's true. But it is a bit, you have to really help somebody, you have to claim yourself to be an authority. Now, you want to put in the work so that you can do that in integrity. But if you really want to change somebody's life for the better, then you have to hold that posture of, yeah, I know about this, and I do know about it because I've studied it. So everything always comes back to the middle path.
Mm.
Be humble, don't be arrogant, but don't be so humble that you are afraid to actually say, yeah, I'm an expert in this, because that can actually be an act of service.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I wrote a post about this last night. I've been thinking about this concept of humility. I'm currently in the process of finishing up reading the Bible this year as like kind of a big project and been reflecting on this kind of idea in the zeitgeist that the pinnacle of spirituality in kind of the Christian, Ziono-Christian model is kind of this like servitude, this idea like you live on repentance and bent knee for your entire existence. And I think it's a false idea of humility in general. And the piece that I wrote, or like the tweet that I put out, was be humble before God and proud amongst men, because God didn't create you to play small, but he did create you. And I think that that's kind of the best model moving forward, because another idea that's pressed into the zeitgeist, in my opinion, as like a psyop, is this idea like ego is the enemy. And when I walk around, I have yet to meet, and or at least I can't remember off the top of my head the last time I met somebody who had too much self confidence or self esteem. But every single day, I meet motherfuckers who have horribly low self esteem and absolutely no self confidence, like the inability to even post something on their Instagram story or film themselves on a camera or walk up to a person that they want to meet at a bar, like talk to a pretty girl, handshake somebody at a networking dinner. That is pervasive. That inability to be fully embodying like who you are, and it's something I've recognized in the coaching space for myself. Like at some point, you kind of have to do look in the mirror and really like give yourself permission to own your areas of genius and own your areas of
As an act of
expertise.
service, as an act of service. That's the critical point. And yeah, arrogance and shame have more in common than either one has in common with confidence. That um, self-deprecating kind of operating system has more in common with arrogance than real confidence. Confidence is just really knowing who you are, the work that you put in, and where you stack up. And confidence is a byproduct of developing the skill of self-reverence and self-love and putting in the hard work to make yourself an expert in your chosen field. Confidence is matter of fact.
Yeah, I agree. And I also would say that a way I like to think about the delineation between confidence and arrogance is that confidence is authentic and it's a downstream byproduct of that inner belief or that inner feeling, whereas arrogance is actually it's just mirroring the behaviors. It's game, it's the right lines, it's putting on the right outfit, it's posturing, but it's a conscious level behavior, and it can only be kept for so long. But at the energetic level, like you said, it's rooted in shame, it's rooted in anxiety, it's rooted in what are they going to think of me. It's the complete wrong paradigm. It's the inward pointed arrow rather than outward pointed arrow. And I do like that you ended on you have to challenge yourself, especially as men. I think we respond energetically to feeling powerful. And I'm working on something right now. I'm trying to like write out my thoughts on like the modern self-love movement, um, because I think it's done a massive disservice to men specifically. It's just an ill fit solution set to the kind of generational issue we have with men and their sense of identity. And I don't know, there's a lot that goes into that. How have you experienced, especially with working through clients through the years, um, that duality of self-acceptance, knowing that you are enough and you don't need to do anything to be worthy of love or worthy of acceptance, and then also the other side of that, which is if you don't challenge yourself and you don't become something, you don't develop expertise, you probably won't ever be able to get there.
Yeah, so for me, the way I hold it is it's not an either or type thing. It's both. It must be both. And that's why, my organization and my living philosophy is called the Savage and Saint Collective. It speaks to this duality. And when I look out into the men's work world, really, you really mostly just see one or the other. If the savage represents relentless, ferocious determination to expand, improve, conquer, transcend your current limits, develop yourself to claw relentlessly toward a perfection that you'll never actually get, but to go for it anyway. And the saint represents the capacity to authentically accept self and world exactly as it is right now. From this vantage point of even the notion that anything would ever need to change is actually laughable. It's perfect. Authentically, not as a idea, but as a direct perceptual shift, if that's the saint. And we look out into the men's work sphere, we always only see one or the other. There's the alpha entrepreneur, sleep when you're dead, emotions are weak, you know, kill your inner bitch type stuff. And then there's the kind of light as a feather, namaste,
All is
you
love,
know,
all is light.
all is love, you're perfect. Like, yeah, just relax. And it's weak. It is weak. But one without the other is not enough. A man must have the agility, really, to express both ends of that continuum and to declare his home to be the perfect center point of balance. And then from that point of balance, to know when the best, most skillful course of action calls for savagery or saintliness, and to be able to do both of those things well. That the savage and saint represents a living kind of system of optimal self-governance, and you must be able to do both. Because if you can only if you can if you can only live on the acceptance side of things, to your earlier point, you will not seek out the challenges that your greatness demands. But if your whole life is spent fleeing from the only reality that you have, which is the present moment, so you can relax in some imagined future moment, then you'll go to your grave missing, a very real part of the human experience, which is the freedom that is only and always available right here, right now.
You've mentioned multiple times this idea of and terminology around self-governance, and I think language is super important, and I can tell you're an individual that is very cognizant of it all. So I'm curious why you choose the term self-governance, because what comes up for me when I hear that is that the self or some part of the self needs to be put in kind of a cage or a framework. Um, so that's just immediately my kind of response to that. I'm curious why self-governance is an important concept to you and specifically the language around it.
Well, I don't think that self-governance implies a cage, but to me, it implies accessing a vantage point from the space of awareness in which you can more accurately see the self experience, which is constantly arising from the space of awareness and returning to it. And from that um, wider perspective, you know how to govern yourself more effectively. You know when to push, you know when to relax, you know when to strive, you know when to accept. So, self governance is a way of architecting the self,
Mm,
sculpting the self, so that the kingdom of your being is a kingdom that is beautiful.
I really like that you said architect because I put out a podcast a while back now, earlier this year, called the Da Vinci Blueprint, which is like some of the best tools that I've found and kind of distilled down into this useful tool set, I guess, for people to begin to, I called it a self-architecture document, like architecting your life, a life architecture document, excuse me. Um, and I love that idea of like being a craftsman for your own life and for yourself and living with like a deep degree of intentionality because it, like we talked about at the beginning, that center point, that big area under the bell curve, that like uncomfortable slash just comfortable enough middle um, is extremely unintentional. It's almost accidental because you're kind of sleepwalking through life. Um, and like you said, I think there is you need to be on one end of the spectrum. You need to be either in so much pain or striving so greatly that you're switched on and like super, super awake. Um, but I am curious as somebody who is definitely on that end of the spectrum where you are super awake, you are super conscious, you look out into the world and you can see these kind of macro patterns, and it is rather concerning. How do you think about and interact with the world at large that are just walking and sleepwalking? Like, do you think, especially as someone who has a platform, like, do you think about them at all? Like, do you try to speak into that space and say, like,
I think it's a really slippery slope, bro, to refer to yourself as super awake or super switched on and to create a distinction between where you're at and where they are. I think that's a slippery slope. And actually, one of my teachers, Shinzen Young, talked about this a long time ago on a retreat, where he said it's kind of inevitable if you really deepen into a practice and you start to kind of access a perspective that doesn't seem to be shared with a lot of people. And you just wish other people would meditate or would have a practice or that they would wake up. And he said it's kind of inevitable, but you want to get out of that phase as quick as you can
Hmm.
because I think it compromises your ability to be effective, really. In a lot of the sacred texts around Buddhism, they always say the path ends, the bodhisattva enters the marketplace barefoot and naked of breast, arms outstretched, completely ordinary.
Hmm.
No special powers, nothing really unique about him. He's just a dude who's around, who's here to help. But he doesn't really create a distinction between where he's at and where the rest of them are at.
I like that, and it's definitely very Eastern tradition of you. I'm curious where you balance that though with the idea of striving and overcoming, even if it is in the container of yourself, in the story of your life. Like I am now somehow a superior or improved or morally improved version of a previous version of myself. Um, because I mean, like you said, like you have domain expertise. There are abilities and perspectives and things that you access, even if we don't want to play the comparison game to other people, which I do think is healthy, and it was a great catch. But to your former self, like you can look back and say that like that was a version of yourself that was at a minimum suppressed, like energetically and emotionally suppressed, because of shame and fear and pain and whatever other circumstances. Um, I would just
But
say like,
there's another way to look at a previous version of yourself, which is doing the absolute best that that version of yourself could possibly do based on the skills, knowledge, and experience that that version of yourself had. And so it's kind of like patience and compassion naturally arises
mm,
when you look at a past version of yourself and say, "Oh, you were doing your absolute best. Your best is better now, but you've always done your best." And then you look at the other people the same way. Everybody's doing their best. You maybe someone might say that my best is better than someone else's best, but I look at it really as luck. I felt like I feel like I was dealt the exact proportion of pain and privilege that catalyzed the deeper inquiry. But I didn't create those conditions.
mhm.
It's like a seed that grows into a tree just happened to land in the right spot. But it's not because the seed is any different than any other seed. It just got the right conditions. So I just feel like I'm a very lucky individual. And I feel like based on the lows that I've been to versus where I'm at now, anybody can get lucky just given the right conditions.
Do you believe in a differentiated soul then? Like, are you slash the I behind you, is that any differentiated from the next to the next to the next?
I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's no differentiation between any of us. We're all literally the same thing. We're like waves in an ocean. There's this momentary kind of illusion that the wave is separate, but really it's all just the ocean. And I think that this wave that we call Michael Holt is real from a certain vantage point, but from another vantage point, there's absolutely no difference between me, you, or anyone else. And when that lands, not as something cool that you read in a book or as an idea, but as a perceptual experience through consistent practice of meditation, compassion naturally flows. Compassion is not about morality or wanting to be a good boy. it's a, it's an inescapable consequence of wisdom, of actually seeing the way it is. When I actually see you as me, then I want to help you.
Mm. I mean, it is powerful, and I think what's interesting is I kind of, even as a kid, without any of the context or lived wisdom, minimum experience, I had this intuitive sense, and I think we see it a lot in children. Maybe just not a me thing, but like I'm speaking to my experience. I just wanted to help people, like I wanted to help other classmates on their little, folding paper projects. And then as I joined sports when kids were struggling to shoot a ball, like I wanted to help them. Um, And it's interesting that I've found myself in a space where professionally, if you will, also seeking to do that on kind of a big scale, whether it's through content or through coaching or through community. Um, and I also find that people who go through great transformation and like come out of that dark place of pain and personal suffering and discomfort, the immediate
Mhm.
reaction is to give that blessing to the next person over. It's kind of there's like a distinct line of things that we gain in this world that, in my opinion, come from God, and you can use whatever language works for that, or come from evil or whatever the antithetical side of that is. Um, and things like money, status, fame, personal possessions, the instinct when you get those things is to get more for yourself and protect them. But things like wisdom, experience, um, the ability to transcend out of states of suffering, the immediate instinct is to share them. Even things as simple as like a joke or something that brought you joy in any way. The immediate instinct is like, how can I give somebody else? This is amazing. Like, have you read this? Have you seen this? Like, do you want to come train with me? Do you want to try this new sport that I found? And those are the things that I think if you can orient more of your life towards, um, like you said, compassion is this almost like downstream natural byproduct that isn't in the state of conscious. It's just like an unconscious behavioral pattern. There was a really cool quote from C.S. Lewis. He was talking, and of course, I'm going to butcher it because I've only heard it once, but he was talking about encountering a humble man. And it kind of terminates in the fact that the man will not be humble in the sense of like what we think of a modern humble man, where he's constantly telling you that he's humble and saying that he's not better than anyone else. It'll almost be frustrating because he'll just be enjoying his life and he won't be thinking about himself at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Yeah.
so poignant. Like I think true humility and I guess any form of wisdom, it has to exit the mind and enter the heart as, like you said, like a lived experience, a perceptual experience. Um, I'm curious, do you advocate the use of things like plant medicines in your practices? I know a lot of your means and methodologies are endogenous through movement, meditation,
Mhm.
etc. How do you think about the supra physiological world?
I don't advocate, but I don't talk people out of it. It's a question I'm asked many, many times, and I have a pretty long list of experience with psychedelic medicine. I think I've done them all, and they've been helpful, and they've been fruitful on my exploration. I think that the the beef that I have is, I live in LA, Venice Beach, so there's a whole lot of psychedelic exploration. The analogy that I've come up with is like, I know that you're into health and you're in the gym. And so the things that are actually going to change you, actually change your body composition is the monotonous training. Okay. Now, there are supplements, let's say, that you can leverage to accentuate the monotonous training that you're doing. But the supplements on their own are really not going to change your body composition. And if you use them in the absence of the weight training, you could argue that it's actually harmful or it's moving you further away from your goal. And I think that plant medicine, naturally occurring substances placed here by the creator to evolve human consciousness and bring us closer to an experience of union are best to be used as a supplement to the monotony of daily spiritual disciplines, things like getting enough sleep, meditating or prayer, or whatever you want to call it, eating real food, taking deep breaths, drinking water, connecting with nature. People want to skip over that and just go straight to ayahuasca. And then what can happen is, you have no real contact with the deeper parts of yourself. You have no conceptual framework for non-duality. You've been eating fucking In-N-Out burgers, and you have maybe a rough experience. Or maybe you have a beautiful experience, but the soil of your being is not really fertile for the insights that the medicine can offer you. They can't really take root. So your experience becomes a cool memory. You had a trip and you saw a jaguar and it was purple and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't stay with you because you're not living in a way that is conducive to insight. And so that's my beef. People expect cactus juice to save them, but they're not willing to do the work to save themselves. And I think the stuff that really moves the needle with regard to self-development and, you know, transcendence is the boring stuff, the daily stuff. How do you organize your daily life? How do you govern yourself?
Yeah, I think we're super aligned there. I was somebody who had not taken any sort of mind-altering substance, sans alcohol, until this year. Actually, I went through my first psychedelic mushroom experience. I did a podcast on it for anyone curious. But yeah, I found like interestingly, obviously it was intense valenced wise, like it was very finite and very like kind of super highway, but it wasn't any more profound than I had experienced in periods of self-reflection or even breathwork experiences. So it was cool to me to feel that because it reaffirmed that the good work and the consistent work is as powerful. But like you said, it kind of requires that persistence and consistency. And something that actually came to mind as you were describing that as well is that it's very similar to the way I like to help people frame their idea of chasing goals, but like remaining present is that you want to make sure that the texture of your day to day on the way to whatever the big goal is how you want it. Like define the perfect day and live those on repeat because the check only hits at most twice a month. The number on the screen is only ever going to change, but how you spend the 40-hour work week, if you will, that's what matters more. That's the actual
Yeah.
texture of your life. And if you hate how the money number is going up, I'd say that's a lot more of a priority to focus on than the actual change in the number. And I'm of course using kind of the workplace analogy, but it's how a lot of people spend their time and life. And I'm just like I will constantly bang on the drum till the day I die because I saw the scam since before I entered the arena, as I say, like into entrepreneurship. Like I just look at the landscape of like trading infinite amounts of your life force and time just to see the number slowly tick up, but having no tethering or no attachment to how that process is going, like no meaningful, fulfilling soul level, as you said about your mission, connection to it. Um, and since finding that for myself, it is radically, radically changed my life. There might have not been a larger change because it is the texture of my experience for most of the time as it passes. Like I wake up and I think about this stuff. This is how I spend my days, what I have the privilege to work on. Um, and whatever the lagging indicator is, whether it is money or clients aided or followers gained on social media, impressions, et cetera, like all of those little metrics that kind of plug along in the tail end, it falls away in the face of like how does it feel as I'm going through life. Um, do you in your practices have anything or put any sort of specific focus on attaching people to their gift and their mission specifically?
Absolutely. That's like a central theme of my work is living in a way that's more authentic, living in a way that's more aligned with how you actually want to be spending your very short life and living in a way that you actually enjoy, because that's if you enjoy your days or the texture of your days, how they typically unfold, then you are said to be wealthy. If not, it doesn't matter how many zeros are behind the bank account. You could be rich, but you're not wealthy. You're not successful, in my view. If we look at the holistic view of a human being, if you don't not enjoying how you're spending your time, then you've missed the mark somewhere. But for a lot of people, for a lot of men, recontacting authenticity is a prerequisite to gain clarity on your purpose because we live in a culture where there's a lot of messaging around how we should be, what we should earn, how life should look. And a lot of guys are willing to sacrifice what's true to them for what would gain status in society. But the the daily, very simple, like I always come back to this in my work. It's all very simple, and I'll preface it, whether I'm working with somebody one-on-one or if they're in one of my men's courses. You're probably not going to learn any information that you don't already know. The line of demarcation here is going to be that you're actually going to start to do the things that you know are best for you because you're going to be held accountable to do them. You're going to connect the dots here between certain lifestyle interventions, like I mentioned earlier, sleep, contemplative practice, hydration, nutrition, movement, getting outside, etc. You're going to notice how a momentum of adhering to those rules for a given period of time is going to start to introduce you to deeper layers of yourself and deeper latent capacities like intuition, like soul guidance from a deeper part of you. And through developing a healthy body, a full heart, and a quiet mind, your unique path, your destiny is going to reveal itself to you. And you might find that you're on track, or you might find that you're way off track. And then it becomes a matter of courage to let go of, the direction that you've been going and find a new path that's more authentic to you. And that's the purpose path.
Yeah, I love that. It rings very true to a lot of the language in my universe that I use, like this idea of embodying and being the Renaissance, starting with you. Like I think especially because you work with a lot of high achievers, there's this, and I'll speak for just my experience. Like I see myself as somebody who can make a big dent in the external world. And unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, the paradox, I suppose, is that the only way to make that impact is actually starting at the self and just completely dissolving into that inner work, making sure that your body is extremely vital. Because once you take the base of the pyramid, then you can build on top of it. And you do start to receive things, like you said, like divine downloads, intuitive calls. You start to experience synchronicity, and life starts to flow in this magical way. But it started with the very basic, like, are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating foods that are alive and actually nourish the temple? Um, yeah, it is kind of remarkable how the very, very simple, arguably very, very human things that should and maybe in the past were very patently obvious have become
So it's
esoteric.
not about what I've come to understand in my work. I think that I'm very good at putting all the information together and connecting the dots and making a clear argument for why you want to do this. But like I said, it's not necessarily revolutionary, and most of the guys aren't learning anything they don't already know. The real work is why aren't you doing the things that you know are good for you?
Mm,
What is the climate of your relationship with you that you're not taking good care of yourself? You know how to take good care of yourself, but you're not doing it. Let's unpack that. And that's what the work is. The work is about treating the man in the mirror the way you would treat for somebody that you love, respect, and are in charge of growing. The whole path, the spiritual path, is about making friends with yourself. Sometimes being friends with yourself means giving yourself a firm kick in the ass and not accepting your own excuses. Sometimes you got any of your boys in your life who'll give it to you straight because they love you. Yeah, sometimes that's love, but not all the time. If you have somebody in your life who only ever gives it to you straight and gives you a kick in the ass, I mean, sometimes you need a pat on the back. And so that's what the work is about, learning how to do both of those things. But again, not as an idea, as an embodied practice through action.
yes,
So
I love that you ended on action as well, because I've been I wrestled, or for a while I was kind of playing on this duality, because I think there's kind of two camps. One is like the true manifestation group, like it's all belief, it's all just in your mind. See it in your mind's eye and you have it already, that kind of thing. And then there's the other end of the camp, which is just act and you'll get the act, like the Hermosi types, right? It's just like do raw amounts of action and put the inputs in and you'll achieve the thing. I think one group ends up getting none of the material things, but they don't hate themselves and hate their life. The other group gets all the material things, but they completely self-flagellated to get there. And so they're kind of spiritually inept. Um, and so I was trying to ride this duality of like belief and action and belief and action. And I've determined that, like you said, it's the middle way. And the phrase that I like to use in my head is action is the highest expression of belief. Because if you truly
Yeah.
believed in yourself and you truly believed something to be fact, you would take the faithful action to do it. Like if you're the manifestation person, you're like, I can be a millionaire, I can be a millionaire. Are you acting like a millionaire? Are you taking the actions to get to that place? If you believe that you can have the dream body, or step into a more athletic version of yourself, are you taking those actions? Um, and so yeah, that's where it also reminds me actually of the verse in the Bible, like you will know them by their fruits. Action is the fruit of belief. If you deeply, deeply believe whatever it is, other people should be able to point to actions that you're taking in your life and see it reaping
And
fruit.
be able to tell you, it's like years ago, one of my teachers recommended that I read a book about Plotinus, who was a Greek philosopher, and he had to quote something to the effect of, "A man shouldn't have to tell you his philosophy. You should, if you follow him for a day, you should be able to tell him his philosophy." And
Mm,
that's, and I'll tell you what, man, in the men's work world, in the self-development world, it's not so hard to read a couple of books and speak the language. Anybody can do that. Uh, the real ones are walking the talk. And in fact, they don't really talk much. They focus more on the walk. And I'm trying to build a community of men who are walking the talk, because that's rare.
yeah, I think I mean, I'm right there with you with the intention. I think the really hard part have to deal with, or kind of the puzzle I'm working on solving, is that to get the attention to find those people, you kind of have to yap, especially in just the modern
That's
noisy
true. I'll
world.
tell you what, I'll share a little bit about my process there because for years um, I was deep in my own practices and I wasn't necessarily professionally minded or entrepreneurial minded. I was making enough money to support myself. I didn't really have a clear picture of where money went. Some people were paying me a lot of money and I didn't really know why, but I was happy to take it and show up. Um, but then I started to really, I guess, I started to feel this moral imperative to share this message that I've been lucky enough to find and to share some of the, you know, life changing, life saving wisdom that some of my teachers have poured into me. And because when I see all the whack shit that's out there that's harmful and it's corrupting young minds and it's detrimental to society. So I felt for the first time in my life a moral imperative to reach as many individuals as I can. And this is 2024 in the West. The best way to do that is to get real with your business. So for me, I just came to this point where it's like, oh, my spiritual discipline at this point in my life is to architect a business that can receive people and help people. And so that probably happened about 2 or 3 years ago. And since then, I've been working my balls off, but I'm really happy to do it. And it doesn't feel out of integrity at all. It feels totally aligned.
I love that. Yeah, I just put out I had like my first post go viral on Twitter, and it was this idea that hard work is a psyop, and kind of the underlying thesis is that effort ends up being this natural byproduct of an aligned mission. Like you can work a 12 to 15-hour day, but you're just literally switched on the whole time, and you blink and you like didn't eat or you didn't say anything, and you've just been creating in what feels like more of a channeling sort of nature, like it was just coming through you. That
Totally.
to a lot of people, a 12-hour workday, or working on the weekends or working in the mornings and nights around a full-time job, that's quote unquote hard work. but it doesn't, the texture of that experience for that individual, for me or for you, it's not hard work.
Yeah.
It's flowing. It's being called to a higher purpose.
I always say I work 24/7, 365, and I don't work at all. So
Yeah.
to me, it's all the same. I'm always off and I'm always on. It's all, I really kind of sought out to really eliminate any distinctions between work and life.
Yep.
It's like, to me, it's all the same. Now, sometimes work means chilling out, resting. My work is just all about being sharp, being on point, being the best version of myself in this moment. And sometimes that requires rest. So rest is part of my work, but it's all for me, it's all the way.
100%. And I think that the ironic thing is that the people that make the distinction, it's an arbitrary line they're drawing in their head, but you never get to like not be in yourself. You're riding through this whole life thing in you. So there actually is never a distinction. You're just choosing to like lock your head or your consciousness in a cage of I'm in this working state right now. And then I can go play and enjoy. So like I'm not allowed to like what's going on here. And I also shouldn't. I shouldn't my means of making money or my means of quote unquote working, this is what it's supposed to feel like over here. And then, weekends are supposed to be my time to enjoy. And like that's probably one of my favorite things about when I finally like, burn the boats, quit my job and chase this crazy dream is losing track of days of the week and
Yeah,
understanding that it's just they are the days. They are just flowing. And this abandonment of this programming that has literally been a thing since I entered pre-K or whatever it is, the delineation between the week and the weekends, there is no delineation. That is a
sure.
construct. Time is just passing. But I do want to punch in on something you said, like you see out in the zeitgeist a lot of harmful information going out there. These false shamans, these false gurus. What do you think is what are a few things or maybe one thing that stands out in your mind that is being pressed really hard as a message of self-improvement or self-empowerment that you think is actually the opposite, is actually harmful?
I think if I look out into the like alpha entrepreneur space, there's a lot of just misguided strategy around emotional regulation and the value of sensitivity and even, some stuff around misogynistic ways of relating to women or women as lesser beings. And there's an encouragement into a kind of macho facade, and that somehow that is what it is to be a man. And I think a lot of young men are going to harm themselves and people close to them in trying to live up to that under the misguided notion that that's peak masculinity. I think in my work, one of the things I really feel called to share is that developing pristine emotional sensitivity is like a damn superpower. It will it will help you to navigate your life, your past. It'll help you to cultivate your future, and it will help you to more skillfully relate to and interact and help other people. The greater your capacity to feel, the more information you have about yourself and your immediate surroundings, the more skillfully you can conduct yourself. Now, it goes too far into the other end of the pendulum. And the kind of guys that I'm called to work with, martial artists, convicts, veterans, type A rough motherfuckers, they're not going to listen to some man bun namaste guy tell them that they have to be sensitive because it's just so far into their way of being. But sensitivity is the warrior path. I like to think of the sensitivity of a martial artist. Think of I've written about this. Think of Khabib Nurmagomedov. He is so sensitive because of thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of drilling. He knows exactly where to put his weight, when to push, when to pull. He can feel what you're about to do the moment before you can do it. That's what sensitivity is. It's the capacity to feel. So we just bring that capacity to emotion, and then we learn how to navigate the world more skillfully. So anyone that's putting it out there that emotions are weak, numb out, get the job done, don't make decisions based on emotion. It's like you're missing it. You have a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is to be a human being.
What do you think that a well embodied masculine sensitivity looks like if you were to have to describe it to someone?
It's the capacity to authentically report what your given emotional experience is in a moment, absent of any kind of collapse.
Mm,
Like to just shoulders back, chest up, just say, absent of any kind of shame or fluffy language, what's up with you? To know, to be connected to your own body moment by moment so you can feel what's happening. And to also be able to tease apart the different flavors of emotions. In my work, I talk about there's the reaction of the conditions of the present moment. There's attunement with another individual. There's thought generated emotion. And there's the somaticized release of experiences from the past. And if that, without training of sensitivity, which is meditation, all of that just kind of blurs together in a knot, and you never really know why you're feeling or what you're feeling, and you're behaving in a way that's out of integrity because you're trying to avoid certain feelings, and you're saying shit, and then you're thinking, well, man, why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. It's because you're not connected, you're not attuned, you're not sensitive. But sensitivity and skillful emotional regulation open the door to skillful conduct and a productive output, a performance output that will stupefy your peers and stupefy you because you're learning how to abide in a space of balance and to regulate yourself more quickly when you inevitably fall out of balance.
I really like that. I think,
Now, just
go ahead.
sorry, but just to cut you off. Now, it's always there's the flip side to the coin. The other dangerous, misinformation out there is toxic masculinity, or that a man's innate drives to conquer and to compete and to crush are innately evil and should be castrated. That's the opposite side of that coin. And that's also dangerous and harmful. And I don't want to live in a society of men who are callous and fake macho and disconnected from their feelings any more than I want to live in a society of men who are being encouraged to castrate themselves and their natural inclinations to protect, to provide, to persevere, and to conquer, because that's dangerous too. So I'm inviting both parts of our spirit and soul, the light and the dark, and we stay in the middle, savage and sane. I'm going to stay right here in the middle, and I'm going to wait for the moment to tell me what it needs from me, because I can go any direction that it needs. Trust me, I can go anywhere. And that's the capacity that you want to build in your practice.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think imagery, of course, that's coming to mind is that blended symbol of the yin and the yang, and within each of the teardrops is a drop of the other, and
Totally,
it's the constant flow back and forth on that uh ellipse where
totally.
it
So
it
think of it this way. So when we think of a savage, we want to think of, a Viking or a gladiator or, a berserker. But have you ever had the good fortune of meeting like an authentically joyful uh, yogi who is so, they almost effortlessly emanate this kind of positive affect so much that you can't help but get uplifted when you're in their field?
Yep.
Of course you have. That's a savage, because that didn't just happen. They weren't just born like that. They recognized that the present moment is a battleground, and they went to war 24/7, 365 to train and train that state in their nervous system, and to just constantly sing that song of love all the time, even when their own mind was telling, encouraging them to be miserable. But time and time again, they went to war and they baseline this state, not for themselves, to uplift people they encounter. That's savage. my teacher, one of my martial art teachers, Dan Santo says, and he's a Filipino martial art master, living legend. He's now in his, I'm not sure if he's in his 90s now, but he has a quote says, "I don't fight, uh, I don't train to hurt the person. I don't train because I hurt the person across from me. I train because I love the people behind me." Okay?
Mm,
So in that way, the saint is hiding in the savage. So just like you said, how the yang and the yin, the I hides within, it's the same.
100%. Yeah, like there's a really beautiful quote from The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and she's talking about love, and in the quote, it kind of terminates in essentially discussing that the love of someone who is not connected to themselves is the love of a parasite, because to say I love you, you must know the I first. And one of the other lines that pulls out of that kind of a stanza is selfishness as selflessness. And I think that a lot of feedback I get, especially on that post that went viral about like finding your aligned mission and not working hard. They're like, well, it's easy for you to say as a 20 something kid, like making money online, and wait till you have responsibility and whatever. And like people that are depending on you, this is a very selfish kind of perspective for you to have. And I was like, it could not be further from the truth. Everything I do is a act of service to people that aren't even born yet. I'm doing this for the children that I will one day raise, for the people that are around me. I would forfeit my life for my brothers, for my family in a heartbeat. And it is actually the fact that I want to give the most that I can to them, that I'm connecting to something that draws forward that highest version of myself. Because the paradox of the provider role in men is that oftentimes men I see all the time, I even see it in my father, it's like all that love for the family unit, for the wife, for the kids, incidentally creates this circumstance of self-sacrifice, self-abandonment. You know, I'll go work the job. I will bend over backwards and I will slave to provide for them because I love them so much. And the sad shadow there is that they gave themselves up in the process, and the best gift that they could have given was full embodiment of themselves, of their own mission, the highest
Mhm.
calling of themselves. And it literally breaks my heart in, you know, the personal context of my situation with my father. But the benefit of my, I guess, sight of that, my context, is that I then now get to radically give myself permission to just dive headlong into becoming the highest version of myself, embodying the mission, to then give that gift to the world. Like the best gift I could give to the world is me, but me on 11, me on the highest version of
Exactly.
myself at all
Yeah,
times.
that's exactly, we're totally aligned that. That's absolutely a theme in my work. It is the highest act of service to architect, sculpt, cultivate the best version of yourself for them, knowing that the best version of yourself will be in the greatest position to serve effectively. And yeah, I think that is a pitfall that a lot of men fall into is becoming a sacrifice for their family and then resenting their family for the sacrifices they've had to make. But really, all along, the greatest gift you could have given is, you know, to develop yourself. Now, I know that it is real. Sometimes life situations happen and sacrifices must be made, but it's also kind of an easy way out to stop from, you know, chasing your dreams or living your purpose. You can use your family as a scapegoat. And people ask me all the time too, these like generalized questions that bother me, like about, well, what about men and women? What do men and women need to do? And I'm like, well, where are men and women? I see a man in front of me. I see a man in the mirror. Focus the totality of your efforts on yourself. Change yourself, address your own flaws, take an unflinching look at yourself. Invite into your life the company of other men who have the capacity to tell you about your blind spots and to make you aware of things that you can't see about yourself, and then address those flaws. Forget about the world altogether. You cannot improve the world. That's impossible. The world doesn't even exist. It's just you. Just fix yourself and then watch what happens. And if a critical mass of individuals would actually accept that responsibility, things would really change. But you cannot, don't become preoccupied with what anybody else is doing. Focus on the man in the glass, stay in your lane, and address your shortcomings. And that is enough to change the world.
Hmm. Man, I think we could go back and forth, but that's such a beautiful note to kind of end on here. I do have three closer questions that I ask every single guest on this
Oh, cool.
podcast. The first of which is if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be? This is barring the butterfly effect.
I would tell him that it's not fair.
Mm,
I would tell him it's not fair. And I would tell him that I actually just had a pretty profound experience around this earlier today, but I would tell him it's not fair in a way that is compassionate and allows him to really process.
mm. Secondly, what is one quote that's always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
Um, there's so many. Okay, here's one that comes to mind. J. Krishnamurti. There is no trying, no doing your best. You either do it or you don't. You're wasting time while the house is burning.
Wow. I've not heard that one. I'm a big quote guy, so it's definitely getting added to the Rolodex there. And then finally, what do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
I believe that my unique gift is to really call forth men who are identified with the warrior archetype into deep and rigorous spiritual discipline, to call back to the forefront the kind of the spiritual samurai archetype that seems to be a bit of a lost art in the modern world.
I love it. Michael, this has been a privilege for myself, and I'm sure for anyone that's made it thus far. Where can the people find you, and what are you working on that you're excited about?
I just finished actually a free email training. So if you go to my website, savageandsaint.com, you'll see a pop-up, and I could probably give you a link for a landing page, but if you just plug in your email over the course of 3 weeks, you'll get the 5 skills that a man must develop to live a life of vitality, excellence, and freedom. And I put a lot of time and thought and energy into it, and I'm pretty proud of it. So that would be one way to plug in. And then if you subscribe to that email course, you'll also get a kind of an education on the Savage and Saint philosophy, ways to plug in with the Savage and Saint Collective, online courses, and residential men's retreats. So if you vibe with any of this dialogue, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, thank you. Um, Plug in, tap in with the network, and subscribe to that email course.
Of course. And obviously, I'll have all your links below for anyone that's made it thus far. Thank you. Of course, you can find this podcast wherever you found it in the first place: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all podcast players. Subscribe to the YouTube for all the behind the scenes going on, as well as, of course, the video format for these podcasts. Subscribe to the newsletter at thevitruvian.co. But you guys know all that. All the links will be in the description. Thank you for spending your most valuable resource, your attention, with myself and Michael today. Talk to you all soon. Be the Renaissance.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.